So Narayan Murthy recently said that Indians are good at copying ideas from the West and implementing it in India.
Cab services, where did it come first?
Have you ever thought throughout the journey that you should not have started this in India?
I definitely had this thought.
If you have to build a 7 billion foundation model out of India, the costing just for the compute would be close to 2 million.
Arjun, so one of your offices in Bangalore and one is in Chennai.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the hottest spot for investing in?
Hey, there are 5 AI events a week here, right? And not all of them are high quality. People are coming, having beer, having a chat, and then leaving. That's not necessarily good night.
Yeah.
But what are you learning out of that?
So what is the weirdest thing that a VC has said to you?
He said Vishnu, I think you should close the current entity and open a new one, because the VCs get to know you're a 4-year-old company, nobody will kind of fund your seed.
Would you invest in someone like Putra?
I want to invest in innovation and R&D, but in the R&D, I would prefer investing in the D than the R,
Yeah.
right?
So welcome to another episode of Tech Talks. Today I have with me Abhishek from Soket AI Labs, Vishnu from Subtl.ai, and Arjun from Speciale Invest. So can you guys tell me something about yourself and what are you building?
Sure, thanks for having me over here. I'm a data scientist by profession from IIT Bangalore, and my startup Soket AI Labs, it's building foundational models specifically focused on vernacular languages. Apart from that, we are also building tools to build intelligence. That is some of the things that we are focusing on. We are calling it a Gen AI studio, where any enterprise can just very easily build foundation models or even fine tune some of these open source models that are out there, and we also make it easy for them to deploy these models.
Okay. And Vishnu.
Hi Mohit, thanks for having me. Nice to meet all of you. My name's Vishnu, I'm the CEO at Subtl.ai. We're basically a private perplexity for enterprises. So we can get this to work at data at scale, internally on dedicated cloud, so that most of our customers end up being BFSI, right? So they get the benefit of like private implementations, and then also being able to kind of leverage generative AI on all of the data at scale. So that's a little bit about what we do.
Okay, and yeah, Arjun.
Mohit, thank you for having me and lovely to be here, guys. So I'm Arjun. I'm one of the founding partners at Speciale Invest. We're an early stage venture capital firm investing in deep technology ideas. We've been around for about 7 years, investing at the pre-seed, seed stage. About $1 million check size is what we prefer. Sectors that we've been investing in over the last few years and are excited about include hardware and software. On the hardware side, we've done things in space, robotics, EV, energy, etc. And on the software side, we've done enterprise, AI, data, infrastructure. Obviously, the Gen AI wave is very exciting for us. We've invested in a few companies and continue to look at ideas there.
Okay, so to start with, I want to talk about the most important thing when it comes to the funding scene in India. A lot of people have been talking about there's not enough funding and there's not enough innovation as well in the startups. So why is that happening? Why is the ticket size also very small? And there's no innovation as well, one would say. Why is that happening?
I'll let the founders go first.
You want to go first?
Okay, sure. I think there is a lot of innovation that is happening. I believe in that. I have so many founders just around me who are innovating and making crazy stuff in India for the world and not just for India. So innovation side, I think it's a tick mark for sure. On the funding aspect, yes, there is less funds that are available as compared to any of these foreign markets. But I also believe that we can maybe make with that particular fund and then ultimately grow and scale. So for example, seed stage in India, a 5 million or a 10 million is still a decent amount to get started with, but the same seed stage outside would look like close to like 100 million. I was just reading the news that somebody actually raised 100 million at the seed stage. So that's the scale. I think we have to make do with whatever we have. So if VCs can come in, trust these companies who are especially working in Gen AI space, we can definitely do wonderful stuff for sure.
Okay, but why do you think the ticket size is so small then when compared to 5 million and 100 million?
To be very frank, I feel that it's because of the market also. You need to look at the market of US and then the market in India. But I also feel that being a smaller market, the ticket sizes are still way small as compared to the work that we have to do at least at the foundational layer. So for example, my estimate, if you have to build a 7 billion foundation model out of India, the costing just for the compute would be close to 2 million. And that is not just a one-shot thing, because you have to do a lot of experiments a lot of checkpoints or the path that you are taking essentially fails. So you need to rebuild, go to a previous checkpoint, then utilize more storage and then do it. So a seed stage, anywhere from 7 to 10 million or even more, 15 million would be like a good amount to do all these foundational work. But again, I feel that VCs are pretty playing it safe as of now. I've spoken to a couple of VCs. They are saying that at least on the foundation layer, it's a wait and watch sort of scenario. So yes.
Okay. And do you have to say anything about it?
No, that's an interesting observation. Some of it I will agree with. Some of it I think is different from our lens in the venture world. Obviously, the capital required in the early days in Gen AI and particularly at the foundational levels for the compute, right, is a new thing for the whole ecosystem, right? We've been used to, building SaaS companies from India, software application companies, which are, you don't need so much money, right? Although even there, a lot of money has flown in over a period of time for scale and growth, right? So if you look at the last 5 to 10 years, even us as the ecosystem and us as VCs, we've been like, okay, we've never been used to the first check being $5 million or $10 million. Forget about $100 million like you're talking about. Of course, we don't have that given the size and maturity of our ecosystem, correct? And the venture landscape itself, right? So it is brand new to say, hey, you're going to spend $2 million on compute, right? And then you got to build a model, and then is the model going to be competitive at what level? And then you're going to monetize, and then, there's revenue and scale. Right, so that entire multi-step process is something new for the venture capital ecosystem also to fathom and figure out how to, undertake that risk. Correct? We think in terms of risk, right? And for us to say, hey, how do we underwrite this risk? What is it going to take? And typically, when we have been used to building products or investing in companies that build products and take it to market in 3 months or 6 months and then start generating some revenue. Right, so this is a new paradigm. So I think we also have to unlearn a few things, right? So I'll be honest about that. But I think we're also looking westward sometimes and saying, hey, that talent pool is just humongous, right? That depth is amazing. Will our talent pool, will our entrepreneurs be able to compete, right? It's an open question. I think we need to be more supportive, 100%, but we will. At the end of the day, the game is global, right? And when the game is global, the playing field, we are up against the same people who have raised $100 million. And then that playing it safe factor possibly comes in to say, hey, do I want to play that game, or I'll play wait and watch and I'll see, let some of these emerge slowly, let them do it with less money, and then we'll come in, correct? I think all of these factors are at play, right? We are possibly just a year into this whole, wave. So I think the next couple of years will be very exciting. I personally, and we as a fund, are definitely excited about the kind of work that is happening. Right, it may not be happening at the scale that is happening in North America, in America, etc. But we have enough quality, right? Both of you are examples. There are many companies, we see enough pitches on a regular basis, right? We have to learn a few things, and we are starting to take those bets.
Okay, that's nice. But don't you think that the ticket size should increase a little bit? Otherwise, the startups would just go to the US. And
I think the ticket size factor is honestly directly correlated to fund size. Right, it's a very, very simple math, right, from the VC perspective, saying, hey, do I have a $100 million fund? Do I have a $500 million fund? Do I have a $5 billion fund? Right? And honestly, we have we can count on one hand or maybe max 2 hands how many $500 million funds are there in this country. Correct? So that number itself is less. So that quantum is there. So if I have, and we run sub 50 million, about 50, $60 million sort of AUM. So, and we're writing the first check 1 million, and we want to build a portfolio, which is 15 companies, maybe 20 companies. Automatically, there's a range in which we operate, right? We can't, for even the coolest companies, we can't break that mold and saying, hey, I can give this company $10 million, because that $10 million is actually 20% of my fund, right? So it comes from fund size and that mathematics in terms of how much it is going. Yes, we probably need more funds that are of larger size, right? I think that is the gap in the market, in the VC market itself. And hopefully some of the homegrown funds that have started in the last 10 years are growing by them having done well in the past cohorts, and their AUM is growing, and therefore they can write larger checks. There are already examples in the ecosystem. Funds that used to be seed funds that used to write $1 to $3 million are now writing $5, $7, $10 million, right? So it's an evolution. It may not happen in the next 6 months or 1 year, right? But that is the step, and that's where that gap is a little bit.
Okay. And Vishnu, what do you have?
So I think this is at least what I personally understood from my limited exposure, but I think Arjun will be able to correct me much better. Look, if you look at like Gen AI companies in India right now, right, they're doing one of two things. They're either building on top of internet LLMs like OpenAI, and then they're building on top of foundation models, right? I think also mainstream investing in India is a bit risk averse. I think it's also like just adding to what Arjun had said. So foundation models are obviously a risky bet, or like foundation research companies are a risky bet, right? And that's probably something we both are probably seeing since we're like more in like the research side. I had a conversation with a VC that I'm not going to name, maybe 2-3 months back, but he basically said, Vishnu, the companies that are getting funded right now are currently building on top of internet LLMs, achieving PMF, and then post PMF, they are de-risking these components by trying to privatize it.
Okay.
So what is clear now is companies that take the internet route, it's tougher for them to build a moat, but then at the same time, like it's also easier to find PMF.
But don't you think that's a short-term gain in some sense?
It is, but so each path has its own benefit. Like the route we took or the route Soket is taking, which is like okay, build core research and then commercialize it. It is definitely a more risky path compared to building on top of internet LLMs. But I think it also has to do with proof points. I would say, like lesser proof points for like the foundation research or foundation model companies on like the tech actually working in the field. I think that's also going to be important to show.
But then someone like Arjun, who is an investor, would you want to invest in something that is built on top of some other model, or would you want foundation?
No, not really. Yeah, we want as fundamental as possible because that is the differentiator, right? You want innovation at the heart of the product, right? I hope there are more investors thinking like us, right? So we are, like I said, we are broader deep tech investors, not just in AI, in other sectors as well. And one thing that Vishnu is talking about directly correlates to you could call it risk. And therefore us and our ecosystem being risk averse, but you can also have overlay the factor of time, right? How much time does it take? One is the money that it takes. The second is how much time does it take? I think the time horizon is possibly the tricky aspect for a lot of Indian funds, right? Because we are also bound by our own fund time horizons, which are sub 10 years more often than not. And if you take first 3 to 5 years out of that, let's say to use Vishnu and Abhishek's term in terms of doing research and then build stuff, right? Hey, that's a big portion of our fund life cycle, correct? So maybe I'm passing the buck on a little bit to our LPs, right? Our investors whose time horizon we are sort of bound by. That's like, hey, I got to invest, see the company build and grow and then make returns and then return capital to our investors within a meaningful time horizon, which is sub 10 years. And if in that, the first 3 to 5 years goes into research.
You lost a lot of time that can go for growth,
Exactly, right? So then you don't get the value, right? And the valuation. And maybe that needs to be figured out. I think Vishnu is talking about being incubated or being positioned out of IIIT Hyderabad, right? And our academic institutions, and you're from IISc, they have a very critical role. If we notice, that is one of the big differentiators in the West, right? What has come out of academia is a lot, right? And that partnership between academia and industry is phenomenal. And venture capitalists are very proactive going into academia and either underwriting research risk, or government gives so much grants and so much support at that level so that the VC doesn't have to put money on research, right? Which is also a good thing, right? The VC possibly need not have to put money on research. I always try to say this saying, in R&D, I want to invest in innovation and R&D, but in the R&D, I would prefer investing in the D than the R, right? And let the R come from academia and government grants and different sources, maybe philanthropy, CSR, correct? We got to find that balance, right? Therefore, maybe some of the R research firms like them are struggling to say, hey, our money is not coming from government. VC is also not giving me research money. Where do we go? Correct? It's a fair, criticism, but that's where we are, right? I think R takes time, and that time is not always available to us.
So what would it take to build something like an Alibaba of India that is investing in startups and also investing in research? Why is that not happening? Like something like Bharat GPT is there, maybe. or something like AI for Bharat?
I mean, we can't say that there are no stories right now, right? Between like Sarvam AI, AI for Bharat, Bharat GPT, there's already like, 3 kind of breakout stories.
Yeah.
And then Krutrim, we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah.
But so we can't say nothing is happening. But yeah, I guess more can happen.
What can we say about Krutrim then?
What can we say about Krutrim? I think they're a good hardware company. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, is it just building hardware or is it building software?
Look, I don't know much about them. I am honestly a bit perplexed that they raised like 50 million just on brand. Because it's not even about like, okay, why are they getting money, why are we not? It's more about, it's a little sad that the game that the hedge funds play in the US, people are playing those games over here. Just they put so much money behind someone that they just can't lose. Right, sort of but yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I think all things considered, they are an AI company. There's a lot of money going into core AI research, and I think that can still end up being a good thing generally for the community.
And what do you think, Abhishek? Because you built a foundation model, like a 1.2 billion model, and then Krutrim is also saying the same things, that we're building a foundation model. Do you think they're on the right track? Or
I think they are trying to do a lot of stuff in a very brief period of time. Maybe that can, like, you can just imagine they are trying to be NVIDIA, they are trying to be OpenAI, they are trying to be maybe Microsoft, Tesla too at one point. Solving all these problems at one point under one company, it's very challenging, I feel, because you can just imagine all these companies, the scale at which they operate, especially NVIDIA, building something like NVIDIA can be very, very tricky, and then you do 3 things on top of that. Maybe they will be able to do 1 or 2. I'm not very sure about it, because again, the roadmap is not very clear on how they will actually be achieving it. They can raise $1 billion tomorrow, but still, if the roadmap is not clear on how they will actually be able to achieve it, I'm not very sure if the market will go ahead and trust them. On the foundation model part, I was super excited when they actually released their model, but then the stories came out that so I'm not going to discuss about that it's built on OpenAI, because that can be what I feel is it was a genuine problem in terms of processing their data. The kind of SFT data that they were utilizing that was corrupted and had OpenAI related stuff in it, and that is why the model started saying that I'm built by OpenAI. So it was a genuine effort for sure, but they claiming that it's a foundation model, and then Databricks coming out and saying that we supported them. Now we don't know what's the reality, to be frank. But is it a quantized model, a distilled model out of what Databricks is working on? We still don't know about it, and they are not being very transparent about it. Like, one thing I really admire, especially coming out of Indian ecosystem, is that they being transparent, at least in the initial phase of what they are doing, and maybe sharing that particular knowledge to the community. So community will play a very, very important role. Even the model that we released, we had a technical blog in which each and everything, how that model is trained, everything is available over there, and community is pretty excited about it. So Sarvam, again, amazing company. They also, when OpenHathi was released, their technical blog, we also learned a lot from it.
And what about Hanuman, the model that SML came out?
Right.
Yeah.
So again, I had the pleasure of interacting with Vishnu sir as well. They have been doing phenomenal work, especially his story of how he started. He was having trouble procuring GPUs almost like a year back, and what all he did to actually get some of those GPUs. Quite inspiring, to be very frank. They have been doing some very fundamental work at their end. I had the pleasure to again talk to some of his team members too at one of the NASSCOM's event. They have very big ambitions. They are building multilingual, multi-model models as well. Some of them will be coming out very recently. But again, I don't know, they also need to put in a lot of effort into doing research. I'm not very sure what they are doing. Not a lot of things are open. Yes, the same thing, but yes, I admire the effort that they are doing and the kind of things that they are putting out, yes.
And Arjun, so I have this question. Would you invest in someone like Krutrim?
No, I think from a very simplistic size of our fund perspective and what capital they're looking for, that's a very simple no. But at a philosophical level, if you ask of where is it coming from, and what the opportunity is, do they, I think somebody mentioned, do they deserve the capital, etc. Right? For lack of a better framework, one, I do agree with Abhishek. It just seemed like they're trying to do too much too soon. Correct? It's you can take that analogy. Can you have 9 pregnant women give birth to a baby in a month? Right? It's usually very, very difficult. Of course, there is a way to say, hey, if Elon Musk did it, somebody can take a audacious shot here, and some people might think that they are India's Elon Musk or that answer to that, etc., etc. Correct? And therefore, some investors might follow that mindset to say, hey, this person has built over the last decade or so a couple of very large businesses. So if he or she wants to take a shot at 2-3 other emerging areas, we should back him or her up with this capital, right? So I think that can be the mindset because they've shown scale in past, albeit in very different domains and sectors, right? So that translating that into these newer sectors, which are also moving so fast, right, is not going to be easy.
So it's a no then.
You could say that. From our perspective, it's a no.
So Narayan Murthy recently said that Indians are good at copying ideas from the West and implementing it in India. Is that okay to say something like that, or what do you have to say about that? Even Nandan Nilekani recently
Look, I mean, if you look at the history of it, if you kind of track like, okay, cab services, where did it come first? Or like, if you kind of look at it, traditionally, that is how a lot of ideas have come. And a lot of them have been good ideas as well. But at least I would say, that's something that does have to change.
Okay, and so you said that you're building a private perplexity for, so how is it going right now and what are the future plans?
So we actually started this venture in the riskiest way possible, which was like, let's build core research and try to commercialize it. So it's a funded research group pretty much, right? Back in 2020, and then we've kind of been doing the core work since then. Little into the journey, we got like 2 defense contracts. State Bank of India agreed to come in as a design partner. And that's really where the market exposure started happening. And a lot of insights along the way. For example, like 95, so this is called RAG, right? Retrieval Augmented Generation. Let's retrieve stuff and try to generate on top of it. 95% of RAG applications in the market today are built on something called semantic search. It's basically a keyword independent version of Control F, right? And we started seeing really strong signs that semantic search is not actually working, and like people are trying to brute force it to work, right? Some examples of that, Gemini becoming really popular because it can see like 1 million tokens, which is basically 750,000 words at a time, right? People are looking to these bigger models because they're unable to get the right information in like, smaller sets. Another thing we saw is the popularity of re-ranker models, where re-ranker models are basically saying like, hey, semantic search is maybe not ordering stuff in the right way. Let's get another model to reorder it, right? And like, I think there's going to be a lot of innovation around embedding models as well, where like we are at least one of the guys that are saying like, no, semantic search is not the right way to go. There's another concept called extractive question answering systems, which is basically rather than pulling search results that are related to the question, pull search results that answer the question. And I think it was that, and like, so the reason I brought up like say design partners and the contracts is we ran semantic search in the field. We ourselves were building on semantic search during the early days, and it didn't work. And when we kind of shifted, built our research from ground up again for like an extractive Q&A sort of system, we started seeing the scores also significantly go up, right? And like, of course, we also don't benchmark with open source at this point of time, at least, because for us, like the field scores matter more. So we prefer to kind of co-create data sets with our customers and make sure it's working for them well, more than anything else at this point.
So to change the topic a little bit, so we were talking about funding scene in India and to different cities like Hyderabad, Bangalore. So you guys were saying you're also planning to shift to Bangalore as well because of the funding.
No, I'm not planning to shift. We have Bangalore presence. My head of partnerships is based over here. So
so you're based out of Hyderabad.
Building this out of Hyderabad.
So how is the scene, AI scene in Hyderabad?
Look, it is starting to grow. I think IIIT Hyderabad is starting to get better visibility. I think there's a lot of that. I think that Gachibowli cluster, there's definitely a lot of good action happening there with like say Microsoft having a huge campus right behind IIIT, ISB being right beside IIIT. I think we're starting to see like cross synergies now, finally, right? Until now, there was action happening only within ISB and within IIIT. Like now people are starting to collaborate, and like that's definitely very fun to see. There are breakout stories, like I think there are maybe some unicorns I can think of are like Zenoti and then like Darwin Box. Obviously not as many as Bangalore. But it is growing, and I think that's also why I wanted to build it out of there, because like if I kind of come here, like look, the Swiggy co-founders are both from Hyderabad originally, and at least what one of them had told me was, he said like, look, we moved to Bangalore because like we knew our chance of survival would be higher if we build out of Bangalore compared to Hyderabad. I think that's a law that probably is true even as of today, just considering how the scene is in like different cities and things like that. But I think Hyderabad is starting to bridge the gap now with like the multiple indicators of that. One, of course, more startups coming out. IT themselves are starting to see more like breakout stories, which I'm personally very happy to see, because like we ourselves are like a IT startup. Another cool thing we're seeing is with GCCs, but that's probably an effect that you would see in Bangalore as well. But basically, like these global capability centers of like MNCs and things like that, they're starting to get more power in India.
And how is it in Gurgaon right now?
So Gurgaon, I think GenAI ecosystem is not as mature as in Bangalore, obviously. I have struggled, like whenever I'm going and meeting people or going to these networking events, I think Delhi NCR region is pretty amazing at other things, D2C branding and banking related and related sectors, etc. But GenAI, it's not that mature, to be frank, and even the kind of skill set that you will get in NCR region, especially for GenAI, does not exist, because most of those people are working in Bangalore, and all these research labs of big corporates exist in Bangalore and other neighboring areas, but not in Gurgaon or in Delhi NCR region. So that is why, like I tell my team that I am based out of Gurgaon, but Bangalore is like pulling me like anything. So might not be moving like the company structure legally to Bangalore as of now, but our tech team is based out of Bangalore itself, and only compliances and other stuff happens in Gurgaon. So that is how we are.
And Arjun, so one of your offices in Bangalore and one is in Chennai. So what do you think is the hottest spot for investing in?
I'm a little biased, obviously. I think there is a very strong gravitational pull here, right? I've spent all my career here, more than 20 years, and I've seen the gravitational pull only increase, correct? And that tends to happen, right? One thing leads to another, and once you see a few successes, then that snowballs. But that does not mean other centers cannot build good clusters themselves. They may not be the same sized cluster as Bangalore, but the size becomes less important. But as long as it is a good cluster where they're feeding off each other, like Vishnu mentioned, there are a couple of unicorns that have come there. So what you want is some winners from each cluster. That is why then everybody will not need to move to Bangalore. And sometimes, being in the smaller cluster also keeps you away from excess noise. Right? True. You're focused on what you're doing. The noise sometimes just explodes in places like here. There's good noise and there's bad noise. Can you keep the bad noise out is always super critical for a startup. Right? So
what would you classify as good noise? Just generally curious.
I think things that he was saying, hey, are there great meetups that are happening at high frequency where learning capacity for you and the team is just fast? Right? So that's the good noise, right? But the bad noise is, hey, there are 5 AI events a week here, right? And not all of them are high quality. People are coming, having beer, having a chat, and then leaving. That's not necessarily good noise. But what are you learning out of that? Who is participating? What are they talking about? That is good noise, right? So that filter has to happen, right? So here there will be clearly volume. In volume, there'll also be quality, correct? Given there's so much volume. The question is, then you have to filter.
Tougher to find the quality.
Yes. So therefore, there's a chance that, hey, one is you can say, hey, in Hyderabad or in NCR or elsewhere, hey, there are no events happening. Now that's bad. But can you have 1 or 2 high quality events, right? With no noise. You don't want to be in the buzz that, hey, there have to be 3 events a week. Cut that out, right? But do 1 high quality event a month where everybody benefits. That's a great place to be.
I had this specific question for Vishnu and Abhishek mainly. Have you ever thought throughout the journey that you should not have started this in India, your AI startup, or move to the Silicon Valley or somewhere else?
So I was actually born in the US. I was born in Bay Area. We moved to Hyderabad since I was 3 and I've been there since then. I definitely had this thought. Should I just go to US and try to raise? But I think the deeper question is like, okay, why does the Bay Area get so much money, right? When like startups come out? Because I think it's more to do with, they have that proof of like, Google has come out from there, a Meta has come, now an OpenAI. I personally believe that once India has its like say Google or OpenAI moment, right, which is we're starting to see good signs of it now, I think the scene should change over here. like breakout story becomes huge, makes a lot of revenue, and then like people start like, what do you think, Arjun? If like a breakout story like that happens, don't you think more LPs will start looking at
100%,
this and like
100%. I think if you look back now, close to 10 years ago, I think in the consumer world, Flipkart was that story.
yeah.
Correct? It changed how everybody looked at it. It changed how investors looked at that ecosystem, how much money they wanted to put into that ecosystem. LPs, angels, people wanting to take risks as founders, right? It happened in one or two domains, right? It happened in consumer B2C. It has happened in fintech to some degree with Paytm and some others, D2C, etc. We've had Zomato IPO, right? So it's happened. It yet has to happen in the sense of cutting edge, innovation driven, and in this case, we're talking about AI, Gen AI. So what is, the OpenAI equivalent? There is no question in any ecosystem, right? Success breeds more appetite of all sorts. Positive appetite, I mean, right? Positive appetite in terms of dollar put, risk capital going in, more people taking risks of different types and trying new models, being more innovative on different fronts. You're right. I'm also extremely positive believer that we're on the cusp of something, right? It's hard to say whether it's 6 months or 2 years or 3 years, but we're on the cusp of something in cutting edge deep tech, right? And AI is a core part of that, right? And when we see the first, close to I think just when somebody will be anointed a $1 billion company, I think the money will be 10x in a very, very short span of time is my, learning. Honestly, it's not just a random belief. It is learning and just observing data of what happened when Flipkart became a $1 billion company, right? Just the money, the people who were on the sidelines, correct, as when VCs, they came in, right? And more LPs put money into them, and the larger funds became even larger, so on and so. It all happened very quickly. I think we can definitely go back in time and see it was 2014, 15 when $1 billion, and then the floodgates opened, right? So I was an entrepreneur between 2009 and 2000 before I started the fund. Correct? I'm still an entrepreneur running a fund, but as building products and building businesses. So I remember how hard it was to raise money in 2009, 10, 11, 12. Right, and how little sources were, and then how 13, 14, 15, right, at least on certain sectors, not across the board, in certain sectors, how much capital flowed in. It was also true for I would say the Freshworks example on B2B SaaS, right? That was a floodgate, and examples of Darwinbox are beneficiaries of all of that. Zenoti, Darwinbox in Hyderabad, right, and that filtered through everywhere, not just Bangalore. So I think similarly, almost there, we got to be patient and we got to stay at it.
Okay. So, but why do you think it's going to happen this year? Is there any sign? Even you guys were saying that something like an OpenAI or Google might happen this year.
We're yet to see it play out. I mean, if you ask me, then Subtl is trying to be that company in 2024, right? We're obviously shooting for it. But we're yet to see it play out. There's not enough information on like what different companies are doing at this point of time, and like generally speaking, the trend we're seeing was 2023 was like a flirting phase of sorts, where like if you're kind of going to a customer, also they're also trying to understand more about the space and figure things out. 2024, I think it's gotten more clarity, just generally speaking. Like I think.
But are Indian companies adopting the models that are being built in India? Are they not still going for Google or OpenAI or Microsoft?
I think that's something Abhishek's more equipped to answer.
So I would say that I think majority of the companies are still experimenting with these API-based models, which are essentially deployed outside. But the trend that we are seeing is that experimentation happened on hosted APIs, but once they have figured out how they're going to use it, they essentially wants to reduce the cost, and hence they are shifting to a more custom solution where they are even thinking of training their own or fine-tuning their own model and then ultimately deploying it. This is true for medium and large enterprises for sure, because large enterprises have that sort of data, proprietary data, that they can actually get a lot of intelligence out of these models by building their own model and then reduce the cost if they host the model under their own infrastructure. So that's the trend that they are moving, and I think startups are also taking a similar path, that when they are experimenting with a new sort of use case, it's very, very easy to just go and use OpenAI's API to just do a POC, figure out what you're going to do, and then ultimately build your own models either on top of a open source model or even building foundation model. People have been discussing this with me for quite some time now.
And is the AI startup culture, like the research culture, good enough in India to start something very big, like an open AI kind of thing?
I would two point of view exist over here when it comes to the youth, especially the people who are into AI and or who wants to be in AI. Research is actually attracting them because that is something where if you are smart, you definitely want to get into and want to deep dive into. Your previous interview actually showed that very easily that young people are so excited about these technologies. They are not shying away into looking at linear algebra, mathematics, or probability and how these models are working or how the inference work. So they are crazy attracted towards the research aspect and they want to do that particular stuff. They don't want to say integrate a couple of language models and then build. From the industry point of view, I think industry is largely focused on how these models can be useful for us. So their target is usefulness, and usefulness can come from either improving the efficiency or reducing the cost. These are the two things that mostly enterprises are focusing on. If you can solve these two things, like either of them, they will just adopt the model like this because they understand. I think you are absolutely right on that part that they have experimented last year on all these models. They have understood it, and now they are going and investing money into core GenAI product that they want to ultimately deploy and either open it to their internal teams or their customers.
But I think we were discussing this earlier off camera that there's not enough collaboration between the academia and the research and the industry. How can we bridge that?
So I can give you anecdotes from Triple IT. So I think maybe Subtle. There's another sports AI company called Matchday. There's a AI surveillance company called DreamView. They're probably some of the early stories of like say startup academia partnerships to come out of Triple IT Hyderabad. And I think there's always a lot of ambiguity on like what is the right way to do these things. Like one aspect becomes like okay, what exactly is the academia's contribution over here, or like how serious is it? Like in our context, it was always like coming around like say our chief scientist's time, who's the researcher at Triple IT, right? He has his own mandate over there. He has his own mandate over here. Like how does all of that factor in? I think another area where there were issues that we've witnessed to these arrangements come around like ownership of IP. So with Subtle, just around the time that we were spinning off the venture, we already had some core research work, right? And then Triple IT has this like research translation officer where like, his whole role is like, okay, how do we get this research into market? Okay. It's a new thing that they've kind of set up, saying like let's kind of try to get these things out there, and like so that his whole role is like bridge anyway. So when we were kind of spinning this off, we knew that okay, like banking or probably legal is like an ideal domain to look at. And around that time, another entrepreneur came and said like, I want to spin this tech off in the healthcare space. So that became a bit of a dilemma for us of like, like, so will he also build on top of that IP, or like, how does this work? We're the ones that built the IP, but we built it as Triple IT employees. So it obviously is ownership of Triple IT at that point of time. So some challenges like that we finally, I think they gave the full IP ownership to the company, thankfully, and like this is a good learning experience for them also. That these things have to be made as simple as possible if you really want entrepreneurs to come and take the research out there. Another aspect is definitely like being able to put some more money behind research that
like something like Harvard or Stanford is doing. Like they have a lot of investment coming up, and VCs are looking at it as well.
Yeah, and I would say that the best academic institutions, if they are spawning this and they are supporting all of this, then they should get a slice of the wins, right? Let them,
absolutely.
Yeah, and they do, right? And that model is we are just figuring that out, right? Let them have a few percentage points of the company, right? When that becomes $1 billion company or a $10 billion company, that capital goes back to that university. Yeah. That's amazing, right? For more research, for more innovation, right? And that's exactly what, the MITs and the Stanfords and the Harvards have done. Right? We should have learned this 30 years ago. We're okay, better late than never. We're learning it today, right? That let there be more startups spawned and ideas spawned. Give them the IP and the ownership finally. But because it started there has to be a return of some equity given to the institute, right? And that's how the academia and that's how the partnership wins. Yeah. Correct? And somewhere in all of this, you need, like you're talking about the large enterprise customer. right? Or at least the mid-market to large enterprise customer also to be involved early on. The startup and the academia are connected because that's where the talent is coming from, that's where the core research is coming from, out of which the startup is spawned. So that partnership is good and that has started. But where is the customer? Correct? Yes, the customer might pay you money 3 years later or 5 years later, but how do you build use cases? How do you get the data, right? You're also not data rich necessarily as a young startup or as an academia. Industry has a lot of data, particularly, let's say, in your example, enterprise search, you want to do that, right? Right? So you need large enterprises to be involved in some form or shape earlier on, and everybody to sort of have those conversations. So we as early investors, we're very, very encouraging of our startups in our portfolio to say, hey, go talk to customers. I'm not necessarily saying get business today. I'm saying if you're not talking to them, you're not understanding their problem statement, and then your roadmap and your prioritization of what you're building, to one of your earlier points, is not happening correctly, right? And that mindset of customer need and what are the gaps in the market can only come from the customer and the large customers, etc. Correct? Otherwise, sometimes you can get carried away in academia and in research work to say, hey, doing esoteric work. There's value to esoteric work, but once it's a startup, right, one has to keep that commercial engine in mind. You can then demand time to get it right and patience. That's a different demand. But enterprise coming in is super critical, right? I think all the points that they've made, enterprises are experimental, then wanting to save cost. They're waiting for the right solutions and asking for the right solutions with AI, because there's boardrooms. This is the primary conversations. What can Gen AI do for our business?
Exactly.
Right? We are hearing that all across. It is bar none. Correct? So when the CXOs are talking about it, right, which means budgets will come. Budgets are there, but you have to give them the right solution so that you can get the budgets and that becomes your revenue and you can build your business.
Definitely. I think the phase that's going to now is it's like, okay, we understand what are the right use cases, but can I trust that this will work for me? I think that's the question that they moved on to.
No, I think that experimentation and then going mainstream, and I think the larger the enterprise, they'll also, they won't do stuff that is very risky to their customer and their business. Right? They will take incremental steps as opposed to really big leaps of faith. So we got to understand that. Hence, maybe mid-market, slightly smaller companies, because the small to mid companies, for them, they have to get ahead to survive. So when they're desperate to get ahead to survive, they will take a little more risk. They will try a few more things. And that's the right customer to possibly go after, because you will save time. Correct? Because the customer will take chances with a younger company also. Right? So again, it has to play out. I'm not necessarily a big proponent of saying sell to startups. Because selling to startups is a weird world. Both sides, the buyer and the seller, are still finding their feet. So that can be risky. But SMB, mid-market, and then enterprise, if you can figure your path out, right? I think there's just so much opportunity out there.
One last question to all three of you. So what is the weirdest thing that a VC has said to you ever that you've gone to pitch for your startup? And what is the worst thing stupidest thing that an AI startup has said to you?
Can I go first?
Yeah.
This happened, I think, 2-3 months back. Again, I'm not going to name the VC. I don't want to get into trouble. Okay. Look, I understand where he's coming from, right? Typically with startups, I think time is money, right? You can't so he looked at our whole journey being a funded research group back in 2020. I made the mistake of incorporating our entity then. So the stupidest, in spite of all that considered, took a risky path, took us 3.5 years to get decent tech that's kind of been validated in the market and whatever. He said Vishnu, I think you should close the current entity and open a new one, because the VCs get to know you're a 4-year-old company, nobody will kind of fund your seed.
Oh.
I get his point. But where I was coming from was, I said, look, there's so much history that's gone into this. There's so much suffering that we've gone through. And I openly told him on the call, I am not going to do that. If we don't raise money, we don't. We'll figure it out. But for me personally, the history of everything we went to come to this point really matters, right? And I think founders in India, at least, they have lesser of a spine when it comes to VCs, to be honest.
Okay.
I myself was like that as well, right? And I think you have to kind of like, believe in what you think and like just don't get swayed by what they're saying just because they're the potential guys to kind of give you money.
But do you think something like that matters? Like a 4-year-old startup is there, and we should.
No, it shouldn't matter. Honestly, it shouldn't matter, right? See, the reality is there are so many biases out there in us, right? Of what perception, what it should look like, what is ideal. Hey, right? He may be speaking for himself. He may be speaking on behalf of the prospective next investor, right? It's all possible, right? It's all weird, but these are all trying to put patterns. While there ideally should not be any patterns. The whole point is you want to be an anti-pattern.
It's a new game.
Right? And
Yeah.
you want to be innovative, you want to break through the clutter, then you got to be anti-pattern. Right? But it's also tuned into saying, I'm looking for the next best company. Oh, it should look like that successful company that I've invested in the past. It should have similar flavor. Yeah. Right? So, it is weird, right? I'm sure, I've said things that are, weird and stupid to.
I'm sure founders. I have as well, Arjun. Definitely.
Right? So I'm just saying, right? It is right. So that's where it comes from. But I don't think there is any real merit to that, right? It matters saying, hey, what have you done
over that period?
Correct. Exactly. What has been achieved? Yeah. What is the progress and where are you today and what do you want to do next? And for that, how much capital and do you, is the risk reward ratio a good trade-off? Is that set right? That's the way to look at it.
And what is the stupidest pitch that you have ever got?
No, honestly, again, we try to be humble from our side to say, hey, there are no stupid pitches out there because what do we know? Yeah. What do we know, right? Like I'm really trying to keep pace with what Abhishek is trying to explain there, right? And then I have to act smart to say, hey, I know what he's pitching, right? It's that hard for us, right? Given founders are coming and pitching literally cutting edge stuff and innovation, what is tomorrow and day after tomorrow and what the future looks like. So, you heard certain things that you feel is unfathomable, right? Maybe sometimes in the realm of AGI, hey, we can achieve it in the next couple of years. Maybe there's been a pitch or two like that, right? Or a claim or two of that nature, that we have something, right? And we are working on something. I can support and say, yes, you might be working on something. But if somebody says, hey, I have a 3-year term timeline to hit AGI, correct? Then I'll be like, yeah, I don't know much, right? And I'm not supposed to know much, but that sounds a little too weird.
And Abhishek, have you ever felt like you can maybe fool a VC with AI these days?
To be frank, no. I'm a very technical person. I'm good at storytelling, but not story creating, like out of the thin air. I'm very open and very frank whenever I'm talking to somebody. And usually I like going into deep tech, and that is why some of the VCs, because they don't have that kind of tech background, it's tough for us also to tell them about what we are working and what kind of technical innovations we are doing. It's easy to say that we are making a GenAI studio which is way more efficient, but when it comes to how that efficiency is achieved, I think only very few people are able to understand it, and we love going into technicalities. So again, being a research first company, that's our bread and butter. That is what we are innovating, writing. Like again, as I said, a custom CUDA kernel, people will be like, what is a kernel? No, I have worked on GenAI for the past 2 years on implementing use cases, but I have no idea what these kernels you are talking about. So it's tough, especially in the core tech, to convey your story. So with VCs, what we typically do is there are levels of complexity. We typically just hit level 0, where we very simply explain them what we are working on. If they seem interested and they want to dive into certain things, then we go into more depth, and the depth depends on the person who is sitting in front of us.
So yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you guys keep researching and you keep investing in AI in India. And you guys can also make a deal after this if you want to as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us. Great conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you.